All right, we are back out of the pool, although the missus did go back to the pool. Um, I thought, I'd come back out. Yeah, I woke up Monday morning and I did not feel very well. I had a little sinus headache. Maybe it's just being out in the pool all day yesterday, going into the air conditioning, and then boom, it hits the sinuses. Especially because as a kid, this is like the second home. The first home, I was 40 years old and I purchased my condo. First time I ever had central air. So now I'm living in the second place I ever had central air. So I guess pool all day in the 90-degree heat, central air, sinuses. So, but once we got out to the pool, I felt pretty good. So that's why I thought I'd let the missus say hi from the pool, especially because I wanted to. I did that as a salute to the many parents that we have in both classes, and the 100 and the 1 and the 10, the 101 and the 102, because my daughter's in daycare. So when mommy and daddy get to have the pool all by themselves, it just feels so good. So that was a salute to my parents in the classes, that is, my mom and dad. Anyway, so let's move on. First off, I gotta tell you, loved the speeches. Loved the speeches. Very well organized, very well delivered, very informative. Got the two or three main points in there. Cited the source. A lot of you did a great job of citing the sources. Okay. Outlines were very well organized, easy to follow along with. Okay. Just a couple of things. Number one, we do want to work on the eye contact. Yes, I still want you standing up, because what you're kind of doing is you're still doing this for two situations. Number one, if you're speaking in public, or number two, if you're speaking online. Okay, so I still want you to stand up, but I do want you to try to keep focusing your eye contact on the camera of whatever device you're using. Because I had mentioned it last week. Sometimes it's really nice when you talk about something to students, and then earlier today, a national radio figure was talking, and he said, "Yeah, I mean, when CEOs realize that they can get real productivity from people without having to have them come to an office." And I do think that that's the way of the future. Is a lot of you are going to be doing, not only are you work from home, but if you are giving a presentation, you are giving a speech, you're going to be giving it by yourself in the room to a camera remotely, so that it goes out through, whether it's WebEx or Zoom or Skype, whatever device people are using. So I was really impressed. The only thing is, I may not have recommended this as hard as I should have. And that, of course, is trying to do your speech standing, but have something like a table or a tray in front of you, because you really don't want that outline held in your hands, and the outline is moving all over the place, and then when you try to use your gestures or do your illustrations, this paper's flying all over the place. It can be loud, it can be distracting. So we want to try to have that down on a table or a tray. But otherwise, I was really impressed with the speeches. I really enjoyed them. It was fun to listen to. But now let's move on. And we now move on to a part of communication I always feel is extremely important, especially because I've always noticed that no matter what field you go into, you're going to need to do this effectively. And that, of course, is group communication. And of course, that's an assembly of people where people get together in order to achieve a goal, to find a solution to a problem, or to come up with an idea. Okay. And groups are very widely used all over. You could be in a bank, you could be in retail, and of course, look at your science labs and many other places at the college. They are constantly, many classes are constantly putting you in groups, not only in college, but even in high school, but especially in the job force. I mean, even at Bergen, I don't know if anybody remembers, because nobody's been there since March, but if you remember, even at Bergen, our administration wing has at least two conference rooms on every floor. Some offices of some of the administrators have a conference room in them. Okay. Now, typically, you want to have about 5 to 7 people in your group. Okay. And that's a very important number, because if you have more than 7, then you can't truly achieve the purpose of a group. And the purpose of a group is to make sure that you establish equal and active participation. All right. For example, if you remember, if, like, say you had a group of like 12 or 14 people. All right. Now, if you get a group of like 12 or 14 people, there's only going to be about 4 or 5 actually doing all the talking. So then what are the other 9 people doing? Okay? What's the purpose of them even being in a group if they're not going to be participating as much as those other 4 to 5 people? All right? So 5, 6, 7 people are ideal, especially because you want to have at least 5 to in order to cover a wide spectrum of ideas. So 5 people, 6 people, and if we were still a face-to-face class, I would put you in groups of 6. And you would go about doing the group project. Of course, things are going to be a little different here. And there are many places where you will work in groups. I'd mentioned, for example, in retail, one of my best memories about this particular area, the very first semester, the spring of 2000, some of you probably weren't even born yet, uh, we had the first Com-100 down in the Ciarco Center in Hackensack. It was the first time the building opened. We had some mainstream classes down there. And I taught an 8 a.m. class, Com-100, and one of the women who took the class there took it there because right after class, she would run to the Sears down on Main Street in Hackensack, and she ran the women's department. And she would tell us, yeah, I mean, there's a big sale coming up. Memorial Day sale, Labor Day sale, Valentine's Day sale, or President's Day, or especially the big one, which of course is Black Friday. One person from each department would get into a conference room and they just start throwing ideas back and forth. How do you best schedule your people? How do you best display your sales items? Or, for example, I know they've moved it. It's in a different part of the mall. But back when the California Pizza Kitchen over at Garden State Plaza used to be where it was, I had a guy, I think his name was Zach Benji. I don't know why I still remember his name so vividly. He was on the wait staff. And he would say, once they knew corporate was coming down for an inspection, or if a couple of new chefs were hired, they would pull the gates down after closing time, gather a couple seats together, and start going back and forth on how best the wait staff and the cooking staff can go ahead and communicate effectively in order to get orders not only in, but to get those orders out to the tables. Even the smallest little bank branches I've ever seen have a conference room. Albeit most times that's where people put the Dunkin' Donuts there. But when they have to sit down after the bank closes, they clear off all that white powder from the jelly donuts. And they go ahead and sit down, and they go ahead and have a meeting. So in the workplace, there's always a ton. I mean, I'm in groups all the time, whether it's committees, my department, I'm always, or the veterans committee. I'm always a part of communicating in different groups. So no matter where you go, what you do, especially when I was in the private sector, when I worked in radio and television, I was always constantly working in groups. But then there's also other places, places like, you might know something like a Gamblers Anonymous, Smokers Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. A lot of, growth groups or help groups. Have groups they get together. And those are very effective because typically, for example, like Alcoholics Anonymous is the one that always students will come up with as a growth group. Every single person in that group has walked a day in your shoes. So that's why those groups are so effective. But one group in particular, where a lot of people don't realize effective group communication is necessary, is the family. Now, for some of you might be thinking, what, talking about vacation? Yeah, I know. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes after dinner one night, you'll all come back to the table. You'll sit down, and mom or dad will just go ahead and say to everybody, all right, where are we going on vacation this year? Everybody throws out their ideas, and you settle on the one that everybody likes. Of course, for me, when I was a kid, it was a week down in Seaside Heights. I got $1 or $2 in quarters because back then all the wheels were only a quarter. So I could play about 8 wheels, get a couple of those stuffed animals. But otherwise, if you get lucky, that's what you do. But there are other really important situations where you will sit in a group with the family. For example, I've heard a lot of these stories lately. And I say lately in the last 8 or 10 years. Because if you're a college age student, you're a typical college age student, okay? Your grandparents, probably your grandfather's retired, okay? And your grandma is getting up in years, and then suddenly your grandpa passed. And of course, it's very difficult with him passing. Grandma's by herself, and although she's been doing it for 70, 75 years, she really can't do it by herself anymore, okay? So now, maybe one night, a Saturday night, everybody comes over to your house. You celebrate the birthdays, the anniversaries, and then you bring out the desserts. Of course, me being 60% Italian, that means bring out the cannolis. And then all of a sudden, the question comes up, all right, what are we going to do with mama? And there's your mom and dad, your one aunt and uncle, and your other aunt and uncle. Okay. And sometimes they will actually get some of you grandchildren involved. Okay. And I've had many students talk about this. And one of the interesting things about having the family do these kind of group meetings is one of the keys to an effective group is making sure you give that group the amount of time it needs. Sometimes when we do the group project face-to-face class, I'll have the groups come in and they'll meet up in places like a study room in the library, or they'll meet down by the student center. And some students will show up thinking they're going to get out of here in about 15 minutes. No, it doesn't work that way. Okay? Especially if you're going to come to a consensus decision where everybody agrees. You got to have your input. You got to have everybody putting in their own 2 cents. You have to have a discussion about all the different ideas or solutions to the problem, solution suggestions, until you finally decide on one that everybody agrees with. Not always easy when it comes to family. That's not something you're going to knock out right away. And there have been a lot of different situations where, very similar to what I said, where grandma's now by herself, or grandpa. I've had some people, especially since quite a few of you also originate from another country, where your grandmother lives in another country and now she's a widow and she has to move here. How are we going to get her here? Once she's here, where is she going to live? I've had tons of students tell me some great stories. Probably the saddest one, though, and I really felt bad for this young lady, it was about 4 years ago, where her grandfather had died. The grandmother couldn't live on her own anymore. So now they couldn't decide yet. It was her parents, I think it was her father's mother, and her father had 3 siblings and their spouses. So they're having the discussions, and they're just bouncing grandma from house to house. They had planned on putting the grandmother's house up for sale. And this young lady said that after a year of them trying to meet maybe once a month or once every other month, grandma still hadn't had a permanent place to live in yet, and her empty house had not even been put up for sale. And I just felt so bad for that young lady. I'm thinking, if your parents and your uncles and aunts had just put the house up for sale, got the money, distributed to the grandchildren, you could have paid for your semester at Bergen. So sometimes you got to make sure you give yourself the appropriate amount of time, and that you're having that effective discussion where equal and access participation is coming through. And one of the things that we'll talk about on Wednesday is about you as an effective individual participant. Because sometimes if you're not an effective participant, especially in the family, if you're like my age, where I'm 54, and I have my sister has passed, but I have my 2 younger brothers, and we're trying to have a discussion about my dad, and then one of my brothers brings up a wedgie I gave him 30 years ago and how he's still pissed off about it. Well, that's not being an effective group participant. Okay, so it's going to be interesting to see how that develops, because when you think about it, especially in the family, you really do need to have those effective discussions. So this is what I want you to do. As you see it from the assignment sheet, I want you to pinpoint a recent meeting amongst your family. Tell me who was there and what it was that you discussed. And tell me if a solution had been found or if there's still discussion going on. All right? Have fun with that. It's group communication, 15 points, and make sure it's in by tonight, Tuesday, July 21st at 7 p.m. Yes, I changed it from 8 to 7 p.m. All right, you guys have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.